Welcome to Stories Pulse. If you're looking for an emotional journey of love, miracles, and second chances, you found the right place. Today's story follows Sarah's incredible journey from struggles with homelessness to a life-changing secret that reunites a family. It's a powerful reminder that love and hope can lead to brighter days. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. You never know who might need to hear a story like this today, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let us know how this story made you feel. Join our Story Pulse family by hitting that subscribe button so you never miss out on stories that inspire, uplift, and remind us of the power of love and resilience. Thanks for being here. Let's dive into the story together. The bitter December wind whipped through downtown Springfield as Sarah Thompson clutched her final paycheck, staring at the foreclosure notice plastered across the tourism agency's door. At 22, she was homeless again, just like in her childhood before the orphanage. The small office room that had been her home for the past 5 years, a gesture of kindness from Mrs. Henderson, would soon be auctioned off. "I'm so sorry, dear," Mrs. Henderson's voice cracked as she hugged Sarah. "If I hadn't taken those loans to keep us afloat during COVID..." "It's not your fault," Sarah assured her, fighting back tears. "You gave me a chance when nobody else would." Standing in the empty office, Sarah took stock of her worldly possessions: one suitcase, a backpack, and exactly $127 in severance pay. Her fellow orphanage graduates had all left for the big cities, chasing their dreams, but Sarah stayed loyal to the small town that raised her. Maybe she should have left too, she thought. The sun was setting as Sarah trudged through the snow-covered street, her thin jacket barely enough to fend off the biting cold. She needed shelter. The bus station was her best bet, at least until she figured out her next move. She muttered to herself, "Think, Sarah. Think." The local shelter was full. It always was in winter. The YWCA had a waiting list months long, and her meager savings wouldn't cover even a week at the cheapest motel. Her phone buzzed. Jenny, her old orphanage roommate, had texted her from NYC. "Got that junior designer position. When are you leaving that dead-end town?" Sarah turned off her phone, not wanting to admit how far she'd fallen. The bus station was warm and crowded. Sarah found a secluded spot behind a column, away from the security guards. Her last meal was simple: a loaf of bread, a cup of vending machine tea, and a small yogurt. She watched trains pass by through the station's grimy windows, each one representing an escape she couldn't afford. Then she saw it: a group of people, mostly women with children, rushing onto a commuter train. Their movements were hurried, furtive, like they were trying to avoid being seen. Sarah leaned forward, her instincts kicking in. Her years in foster care had taught her how to spot trafficking. The adults were gripping the children's arms too tightly, avoiding security cameras. Then Sarah saw her, a little girl no more than 8 or 9, darting away from the group. She made her way across the tracks, ducking behind a kiosk, trembling but determined. The girl waited until the last train car disappeared. Then she crossed the tracks and headed toward the station entrance. Sarah's heart raced. She knew this girl needed help. The girl stepped into the fluorescent lighting. Sarah noticed her odd clothes: muddy boots, an old-fashioned fur coat, a long skirt, and a gray wool headscarf. The girl's blue eyes scanned the station, filled with fear and determination. When she spotted Sarah's corner, something seemed to draw her in. "Would you like some bread?" Sarah asked gently, remembering to keep her movements slow and steady. The girl's eyes widened at the offer, and she nodded shyly. "Yes, please," she whispered, cautiously stepping closer. Sarah pulled out a wet wipe, one of the few luxuries she had left, and offered it to the girl. "Let's clean up first." As she helped the girl, she introduced herself. "I'm Sarah. What's your name?" "Emma," the girl whispered. "Emma Miller." Sarah broke the bread in half and shared her yogurt with the girl. She watched as Emma devoured the food, recognizing the desperation in her hunger. Sarah hesitated before asking, "Those people on the train, they weren't your family, were they?" Emma tensed but kept eating. After a long moment, she spoke quietly. "Pete sold me to them for a bottle of whiskey," she said, her voice eerily calm. "Pete's my mom's boyfriend. He beat her up so bad one day that she couldn't get up. Then he took me to the station and sold me to them. They made me beg for money. Sarah's heart broke, but she knew one thing for sure. Emma had survived something unimaginable, and now Sarah was the one who would help her survive. Mother tried to escape with you, but he locked you both inside. Emma's face went pale as the detective continued, her voice softening. Your mother didn't make it out, sweetheart, Detective Martinez said gently. She died in that fire. We've been looking for you ever since. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The news hit her like a punch to the gut, and she felt Emma's small hand tremble in hers. Emma didn't seem to comprehend fully at first. She just stared at the detective, her blue eyes wide, as if she was waiting for more. Something to make sense of it all. But why didn't anyone tell me? Emma whispered, almost to herself. Why didn't anyone come for me? Detective Martinez glanced at her partner, and for a moment the room was silent. Then the detective spoke again, her voice thick with emotion. Emma, the fire was a tragedy, and we have reason to believe it was no accident. Pete, he didn't just start the fire. He's been involved in some pretty serious criminal activities, including trafficking. He tried to cover his tracks, and after your mom's death, he thought you were the last loose end. Sarah's mind reeled with the weight of the information. Pete had set the fire. He had sold Emma to people as if she were nothing more than an object. The anger inside Sarah grew, but she kept her composure. Emma needed her to be strong right now. Sweetheart, Sarah said softly, kneeling in front of Emma. You're safe now. They're going to make sure you're okay. You're not alone anymore. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She was too numb. Her small frame trembled against Sarah, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah realized that the little girl in front of her wasn't just surviving anymore. She was beginning to heal. Detective Martinez stood up and motioned toward a door at the far end of the room. We're going to start an investigation into Pete's actions. But right now, Emma, we need to make sure you have somewhere safe to stay. Miss Thompson, I know this is a lot, but we'll get everything sorted. We'll take care of you both. As Sarah and Emma were escorted to a safe room in the station, Sarah couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she believed things might start getting better. Grace's words echoed in Sarah's mind as she trudged through the bitter cold of another night. She was exhausted, her body sore from the snow shoveling, and her soul drained from the constant juggling of jobs, paperwork, and visits to St. Mary's. But every time she saw Emma's small face light up when Sarah arrived at the orphanage, the weight on her shoulders lifted just a little. It was all worth it. She hadn't forgotten Grace's advice to take care of herself, but it was hard when the survival mode kicked in. Sarah had no family left, no safety net to fall back on. She barely had enough to eat some days, and the idea of renting an apartment felt like an impossible dream. But somehow, as Emma's new life began to take shape, Sarah found herself clinging to a flicker of hope, one that had been buried under years of struggle but was now beginning to burn bright again. Sarah's phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Detective Martinez. "We've found the people who were involved in trafficking Emma. Pete's associates are under investigation now, but we need your help to press charges. We're scheduling a meeting at the station to go over everything. I know this is a lot, but we're so close to putting them away for good." Sarah's heart raced as she read the message. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment when she could do more for Emma than just be a comforting presence. It was time to make sure Pete and the others could never hurt another child again. But the weight of the responsibility hit her. This wasn't just about helping Emma anymore. This was about bringing justice to all the other children like her. But where would she be in the process? How could she keep the promise she made to Emma if she had no place to live? No stability. The thought was almost too much to bear, but Sarah shook it off. She couldn't afford to be overwhelmed. Not now. Not when Emma needed her. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the police station with her stomach in knots. She had gone through the paperwork for what felt like hours, but this meeting with Detective Martinez was different. This was about making sure the people who had stolen Emma's childhood paid for their crimes. She greeted the detective with a tight smile, doing her best to appear calm despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Emma had been doing better, but she was still haunted by the past. and Sarah couldn't help but wonder how long it would take for the scars to heal, for both of them. "We're almost there," Detective Martinez said, her voice soft but steady. "I know this is hard, Sarah, but you're doing the right thing." I don't know how I'll keep going," Sarah confessed, her voice breaking for the first time in weeks. "I'm barely surviving. I want to be there for Emma, but I don't even have a place to stay anymore. I'm running on empty." Detective Martinez gave her a sympathetic look. "We're going to figure this out, Sarah, one step at a time." The words were comforting, but they didn't quite reach the depth of Sarah's anxiety. She couldn't help but wonder how much longer she could keep going without breaking. She needed a home, a stable life, a chance to rebuild everything she had lost. But as she looked at the files in front of her, the faces of the people who had hurt Emma staring back at her, she knew there was no going back now. She was in this for the long haul, whether she was ready or not, and she would do whatever it took to protect Emma. That was her purpose now, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah had something worth fighting for. "Okay," Sarah said, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this. Let's put them away for good." Charlotte's voice trembled as she recounted the events that had unfolded all those years ago. "Margaret had convinced me," she whispered, "that you couldn't handle 2 babies on your own, Nathan. She said you were too fragile after your wife's death, that it would be better this way. I didn't think—" She broke off, her face pale and contorted with guilt. Nathan's jaw clenched as he processed her words, his face a mixture of disbelief and fury. "You gave my daughter away?" he asked, his voice shaking with rage. "You allowed another family to take her without my knowledge?" Charlotte nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It wasn't my decision. Margaret had all the connections. She was persuasive. She made it seem like the only way to help you. And then, after she left town, Her voice faltered. "I regretted it every single day. But it was too late. The papers were signed." Emma and Lily, oblivious to the tension in the room, continued to chatter by the aquarium. Their innocent voices sounded so similar, so alike, as if they had been made to fill each other's spaces. Nathan's gaze shifted between the 2 girls, who now seemed to share a secret language, their bond undeniable. Sarah felt her head spin as she tried to process the enormity of what Charlotte had just revealed. Emma had a twin. She had a family she never knew about. Sarah's heart ached for Emma, who had spent her life in an orphanage, unaware of the life she could have had. "Why didn't you come forward earlier?" Nathan asked, his voice still low but laced with bitterness. "Why wait until now?" "I couldn't," Charlotte replied softly. "I didn't know how to tell you. I thought you were better off not knowing. I was wrong." She looked at the 2 girls, her expression filled with sorrow. "I thought if you knew, it would only bring you more pain. But now, I see what I've done. I've kept them apart all these years." Nathan's expression softened slightly, though the pain in his eyes was evident. He was conflicted, torn between the life he had built for Lily and the reality that his daughter had been raised without him, without the family he had envisioned. For a long moment, the room was silent, save for the soft gurgling of the aquarium's filter. Sarah stood by, feeling the weight of this revelation pressed down on her chest. This was more than she had ever bargained for when she found Emma at the bus station. Her role had been to protect Emma, to make sure she had a future. But now with this knowledge, she wasn't sure what her role was anymore. The 2 girls continued to laugh, unaware of the life-changing conversation unfolding around them. The truth was out now. Emma wasn't just an orphan anymore. She had a family, a history, a twin sister, and Sarah had to figure out where she fit into all of it. Nathan turned to Sarah, his face etched with new resolve. "I need to make this right," he said, his voice steady. "I need to get to know her. I need to tell her the truth." Sarah nodded, unsure of what the future held, but knowing that everything had just shifted. Emma's life was about to change in ways that none of them could have predicted. The bond she had formed with Sarah, the woman who had fought for her, might be tested, but Sarah would do everything in her power to keep Emma safe and loved. It was no longer just about surviving. It was about helping Emma understand who she was, where she came from, and how to navigate the storm of emotions that would surely follow. "We'll take this one step at a time," Sarah said softly, her heart heavy with the realization that life was never as simple as it seemed. But as long as she had Emma, As long as she had a purpose, she would keep moving forward, no matter the cost. And as the two girls leaned closer to the glass, pointing out the fish and laughing together, Sarah allowed herself a brief moment of peace. For now they were together, and that was all that mattered. The rest would come later. The first time in a long while Sarah felt at peace. The journey had been difficult, filled with pain and loss. But here they were, standing together in this moment of joy, surrounded by love. It was a love that had been tested, a love that had grown through hardship, but it was real, and it was theirs. As the laughter of the girls filled the air and the soft glow of lanterns illuminated the evening sky, Sarah couldn't help but think of how far they'd come. Emma, once a frightened child in an orphanage, now laughed freely, her nightmares fading as she embraced the warmth of family. Lily, the girl who had grown up in luxury, now shared that same bond with Emma, their twin connection unbreakable, stronger than anything that could have separated them. Nathan stood by her side, his arm around her waist, a content smile on his face. The man who had been consumed by grief and anger was now looking at her with admiration, love, and a deep appreciation for the life they had built together. For Sarah, this moment was a culmination of everything she had fought for, from the cold bus stations, to the desperate days of searching for work, to the unimaginable discovery that Emma had a twin, and finally to this, her wedding day. It was all worth it. She had found a place in this world, a place where she belonged, with a family she could cherish and protect. As they watched the girls run off to join the rest of the guests, Sarah leaned into Nathan. "I never imagined this," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "But I'm so glad we're here." Nathan kissed her forehead gently. "Miracles, Sarah. We found each other when we least expected it." The night continued, filled with laughter, music, and dancing. And as Sarah looked around at the people who now meant everything to her, her husband, her daughters, the family she had fought so hard to create, she realized that sometimes the most beautiful chapters of life are written after the hardest battles. And for Sarah, this was just the beginning of a new life, a life filled with hope, love, and the promise of brighter days ahead.